Good Monday morning. Hey, everybody. It's Panthers beat reporter Mike Kaye and Smiley McGee, or as they know him in the streets, fellow Panthers beat reporter Alex Zietlow. And this is a special edition of the Processing Blue podcast where we talk about the Panthers and other things, maybe Broadway musicals if you're lucky. But we are here on the eve. We are here on the eve of the legal tampering period, the negotiating window, whatever stupid title the NFL has come up for it, on a Sunday night. We are, just to give you an idea of what's going on, DK Metcalf was just traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers roughly 18 minutes ago. Harold Landry reached a deal with the New England Patriots a little over an hour ago. So the pieces are coming off the board. I will tell you, based on what I know, the Panthers did look in on DK Metcalf. The price, obviously huge. He's getting, I believe it's reported as a 4-year, $132 million extension. That's bananas. And while I think he is one of the true number one wide receivers in the game, giving up a second round pick and paying that price is a lot to stomach. And I don't know if they're in a position to contend in a way that would be logical. That said, neither are the Pittsburgh Steelers. They don't even have a quarterback at this point. So, look, I understand people are going to be in their feelings about this. Totally get it. I understand both sides of the spectrum. That contract is huge. It was another reason why I didn't think trading for T. Higgins on the franchise tag made a lot of sense. But before we get into all of our analysis, let's say hi to Smiley McGee, or Mr. A to Z, or Alex Zietlow, as he prefers to be called. How you doing?
Dude, I only prepared for musical theater.
Oh, man. Well,
I got Stella Hamilton in here. I got Dear Evan Hansen in here. Like I did a deep dive on Wicked and how the movie contrasts with the onstage performances. Like I'm completely in a bind.
well, hopefully you give some good free agent recommendations, or if we're going to dare to find you, we'll have to turn to the Western Sky. Anyway, so look, a lot to get into. For those who don't know, I covered the Hornets on Saturday night, which turned out to be more of a Panthers assignment than anything. At the Spectrum Center, I broke that the Panthers agreed to a 1-year deal with Austin Corbett. He is now locked up. As Alex reported this morning, we're recording this on a Sunday, Corbett is set to make $2 million or $3 million in base salary, and can earn up to $7 million, according to Off the Record, who has just since updated the contract. He's getting $2 million guaranteed at signing. Then, roughly an hour later, while I'm watching, Tijon Salon running down the court, the Panthers, we also reported that the Panthers agreed to a 2-year deal with Tommy Tremble. I reported last night the deal is for 10.5 in base salary, 10.5 million in base salary over 2 years. There are reports out there that he can make up to 16 million in incentives. Let's get into these two deals, okay? Let's first start with Austin. This followed the Panthers giving a restricted tender to Cade Mays. Cade Mays is presumably going to be back. He can still sign an offer sheet. He's not locked in yet until he signs that tender, but he's probably not going to see $3.4 million anywhere else. So it feels safe to say that he will be back. As I have said on this podcast before, the Panthers ideally wanted both players back. That was not lip service. They want to see a competition here. I think it's really interesting because on base salary, Cade Mays is making more than Austin Corbett. And so we will see who is able to win that battle. Even if Austin Corbett loses, he's great, insurance for Damian Lewis, who had some injury woes, and Robert Hunt throughout the year. What I will say is, together in base salary, Cade Mays and Austin Corbett account for $6.4 million on the salary cap.
Mm.
That's not even on the salary cap. That's just what they're being paid. There are more than a handful of centers that make that money or more themselves. And look, Tutu Atwell, a number 3 wide receiver for the Rams, is making $10 million this year. Oh, $3.6 million saved in signing 2 centers. So they're not making that Atwell money. Let's get into this, Alex. What do you think of the re-signing? Do you think it was the right move? Do you think they should have gone the younger route with Cade Mays from the jump? Or do you like that they're putting in some competition and living up to the words of Dave Canales and making everybody uncomfortable in where they're at?
Yeah, I think you kind of led me with that question because you knew how I was going to answer. Yeah, I think it's smart that they signed both of these guys, particularly on the price that they did. I think it's really tempting, and I've said this before, it's really tempting to narrowly put these guys in a box and say, okay, these 2 guys played center for a bulk of their time last year, and so they're 2 centers. That's who they are. Well, a year ago, Austin Corbett was just like only considered a guard, an interior guard guy and we were asking questions. Hey, will he be effective at the center spot? Like, could he snap the ball regularly? Like, will he be able to kind of orchestrate and conduct the offensive line in a way that a center needs to do? And through the first 5 weeks of 2024, he did that with aplomb. So, that it's important to know that these 2 guys are quite versatile. I mean, like when Cade Mays came onto the scene, I think it was your first year reporting on the team, Mike. You wrote a story about him playing at the fullback position. Like these are two versatile guys, and I think that shouldn't be overstated when you talk about the fact that like the headline could be, yeah, the Panthers locked down 2 centers, but they really locked down 2 guys who can help this offensive line in a variety of ways, particularly if you look ahead a little bit and see, hey, Brady Christensen's probably not going to be in Carolina next year. Brady Christensen was such a valuable, versatile guy for the team last year. He's probably not going to be back. So why not lock down a guy like Cade Mays who's literally lined up in the backfield before, as well as different parts of the offensive line? And why not lock down Austin Corbett, who outside of injuries has been super reliable for the Panthers?
Yeah, and I think you brought up something excellent there and that I didn't really think about in initial analysis. But when you talk about their versatility, they're also extremely athletic centers, right? They are not your grandpa's centers. Unless your grandpa was like Chuck Bednarik or was into Chuck Bednarik at the time. Like,
let's just assume that no one's grandfather that listens to this podcast was an NFL starting center, but go
right. Yeah. I mean, so what I would say is, they do a lot of zone blocking. If they do outside zone, you want your centers to be able to get out in space, block down the field. And both of those guys can do it. I also think we've learned over the last 3 years that offensive line depth shouldn't be taken for granted. Now, when you look at their offensive line, and we'll do a look at the under contract depth chart that Zach has put together, slides for later. But when you look at that, they're rolling deep at basically every position except for left tackle because, they've decided that Nijman is better off at right tackle. I mean, he's going to be the swing tackle. Brandon Walton, a guy that the offensive line coaches work with in Tampa, is back on a futures deal. He's, presumably the backup for now. I do think they'll draft a tackle at some point in the draft as well. But you look like Chandler Zavala played extremely well when he got time last year. It was a complete 180 from the year before, with the pressure off of him being an immediate starter. He can back up the guards. Whoever loses the competition can back up the guards or the tackles. Cade Mays is extremely versatile. He can play right tackle. He can play left tackle too in a pinch. So I think like they're in like a really good spot. They talked about the trenches. They put their money where their mouth is. They also were smart with their money and re-up these 2 centers who are going to cost significantly less than basically any other starting position on the line. That said, let's get to Tommy Tremble. There was a little bit of trepidation when it was originally reported by NFL Network that he was getting a 2-year up to $16 million contract. Now, obviously, people read that and they're like, $16 million. I had an executive text me immediately from another NFC team and go, that's a hell of a deal for Tremble. And ultimately, he did get a great deal. 2 for 10.5 base is more than what I initially projected, where I thought he'd get $4 to $5 million a year. And I thought he'd sign a 1-year deal. But the truth is, he doesn't turn 25 until June. There was a report that he's getting $8 million guaranteed. That's fine for a guy who's going to be just turning 27 when he inks his next contract. He's a guy who does have upside. They wanted him to be the starting tight end last year. They did everything to get that done, and then just he had nagging injuries. I was not big on Tommy Tremble my first year here in 2022. I thought he just didn't play the game smartly. But I got to tell you, over the last 2 years, he's really improved as a red zone target. He's improved as a blocker. I think he's a big influence in the locker room. And obviously, he's Chuba Hubbard's best pal on the team. So I think there's a lot of things going for him. What's your take on Tommy returning?
My take is quite simple. I understand the anxiety that a lot of Panthers fans had when they first saw that number because of Ian Thomas a couple years previously. I mean,
Sure.
like that. I mean that talk about someone who got paid after a really good rookie season with the Panthers, and he didn't get paid immediately after his rookie season, but a lot of that was because of the potential that he showed his first season. And then it never truly worked out. And I don't think that Panthers fans even know. He's a free agent for the Panthers this year. He's probably not going to get re-signed, but he's still on the roster from this past year. And so I totally understand that that anxiety, that trepidation, as you said. Ultimately, I agree with you with what you said about Tommy Tremble's upside. I think his age is really important. Selfishly, he's a really good guy in the locker room, at least to us. And that normally bleeds into the fact that you are a good leader on the team regularly. And also it's important to note that like this tight end room isn't super deep. Like when Frank Reich came in and he was planning on having 5 tight ends in the room, granted they weren't like super contributing tight ends, but when he had 5 tight ends in the room, he was like, yeah, I feel good about our tight end depth. It's really Tommy Tremble and Jatavian Sanders right now. I mean, Ian Thomas is gone. You got special team ace Felipe Franks, but like the only memorable
Free agent.
Yeah, but he's gonna be a free agent, and the only memorable pass he got was from Johnny Hecker last season, and he dropped it. So like, I don't know. I think this was necessary just to shore up that room. You wrote a good story about like the fact that Dave Canales is compelled by one particular tight end in this draft, and he really loves his versatility and stuff like this in that position. And it made it seem like they might be investing in tight ends this offseason, but retaining Tommy Tremble makes sense. Kind of rambling, but you get what I'm saying.
Well, and before we even talked to Dave, I wrote a story that tight end was one of the positions that they should really focus on in the draft, because everyone I talk to says the tight end's deep in this draft. Obviously, the caveat is we're beat writers. We're focused on a lot of other things other than watching tape. And so you've got to go to the experts and the people I trust. But if I can make you feel a little bit better about the money spent in the tight end room, as somebody listening to this as a fan, Jatavian Sanders is getting paid $1 million this season. So like they're only investing about $6 million at the tight end position right now with guys who are currently on the roster. If they draft another guy, maybe even if it's a guy early, that's another $1 or $2 million. Again, it's good asset allocation from a cap standpoint. So I don't think they're in a bad way either way. And again, Tommy Tremble's 24 years old as we recorded this podcast. He does not turn 25 until June. I think, he's a guy who's homegrown. They know him better than anybody else. If you look at this tight end free agent class, it's full of accomplished yet aging guys in the twilight of their career. If you look at what Austin Hooper got, he got 1 year, $5 million. And you look at, Zach Ertz, he got 1 year, 6 point something million dollars. Like it was around that stuff, and he's younger and has potential, and it's a multi-year deal. And so I think that's what you have to, you take the length of the contract with the money, and I think it makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's move on. Speaking of re-signings, let's do a segment that I'm going to call Who's Next?
What a great branding.
Bill Goldberg was one of the first Panthers ever, and he got cut. And his famous line was, "Who's next?" I did misspell it in the notes because I was rushing this morning, but that's okay. So hopefully Zach doesn't put through that lower third, and it's got a misspelling. If it is, it's not Zach's fault; it's my fault. Um, so let's talk about uh five guys that I think are notable to this free agent class that have not been re-signed. As of now, as we're recording this, there are 17 unrestricted free agents. We know that one of them, Shaq Thompson, will not be back. Um, so I'm gonna set up each guy and then do a little explainer, and then Alex and I are each gonna say yay or nay whether they'll be re-signed. So I'm gonna start with.
Can I say yes or no? I'm not really a yay or nay guy.
I mean, sometimes you're horsing around, and I'm like, nay, but yeah, that's fine. All right, so let's get into this. So I have four guys that I wrote down in our notes, and then there's going to be one guy that's a mystery. So Alex is gonna it's gonna be off the top of his head. I didn't do this on purpose, but I'm gonna claim I did. Anyway, Brady Christensen. He's a guy who's extremely versatile. Uh, I think he's ready for a starting job somewhere else. He's been a starter at left guard. He's been a starter at right tackle. He's been a starter at left tackle. I mean, I'm pretty sure he can make balloon animals. There's a lot going on there. I don't see a way that he returns after both those guys got signed. What do you say, Alex?
No.
Yeah, this is a podcast. He was shaking his head. I'm like, well,
Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah.
Xavier Woods is a guy who's been here for 3 years. I thought in 2023 he played phenomenally, and then last year I was very disappointed with how he kind of carried over that momentum, having been in this defense for 2 years. I do think that the safety group is largely influential in how the running game was not effective last year. They just offered no help to the front in that regard. But I do think Woods is the best of the group. There are five safeties who are about to hit free agency. I think he's a guy who tests the market, and then you see what you get in your haul, and then yeah, maybe he's back. I'm gonna say maybe on this one. What do you got?
I think yes that he's coming back. He led the team in interceptions. Like you said, pretty much every single safety on this team is a free agent, and the safety group didn't really perform very well outside of Damani Richardson, who was a pleasant surprise as an undrafted rookie. So I think that they're going to try to maintain some stability and bring him back.
Johnny Hecker. I'm going to say yes, but it might not be immediate. He's a guy who is coming off a pretty rough year, but he is a generational punter. There are a lot of teams with punter needs. I do think he'll have a lot of options. Right now, I'm under the impression that the negotiations aren't going, one way or another. I think it's a wait and see approach. I'm going to say yes. What do you got, Alex?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
So with that prediction, two of the three specialists from this past season are not going to be in Carolina. And not to get ahead of ourselves. Wait, are we going to talk about Eddie Pinheiro? No, we've already talked about him a lot. So yeah, Eddie Pinheiro's gone. I think Johnny Hecker's going to be gone, but JJ Jansen's already in place. So yeah, we got to talk about him.
Yeah, see, look, I already used up my one maybe with Woods, which I didn't even say was a rule, but there you go. So I couldn't do that with Johnny. Mike Jackson, I think will be back. He played very, very well. It was a pleasant surprise. It was a gem of a trade. They traded Mike Barrett, the 7th-round pick, for him to Seattle. Mike Barrett didn't even play in an NFL game this year. I think Mike Jackson's back, but I think it'll surprise people how long it might take. What do you got?
I'm kind of eating some humble pie right here. I really thought that Mike Jackson would be locked up before he could even test free agency. I thought that the Panthers would try to lock him up before the legal tampering period opened to play opposite of J.C. Horn, because I was under the impression that the front office really liked him, and they still could really like him. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm just saying I really thought that he would be back quicker, but I'm still gonna roll with him. I think that Mike Jackson's gonna be back.
All right, the last one, the surprise one, Sam Franklin. Now, Sam Franklin's been a special teams ace for this team for a really long time. They do not want him to play on defense. That is abundantly clear. You can look at the snap counts. You can look at whatever you want. Even when he had that huge play against Minnesota 2 years ago, he was benched for a rookie. He was then benched for a rookie this year. So there's that. But he's also so good on special teams, but he's also going to cost a lot of money. I'm going to say no. What do you got?
Why do you think he's going to cost a lot of money?
Because he's coming off a raise year. I also think that teams in this offseason will prioritize gunners. That's going to be a thing. I think that that's a part of the market that you are going to see gunners and specialists or gunners and returners get paid relatively well. I think, and I also think you're going to see guys that can play core 4 get paid a little bit better because of the new kickoff rules and how teams have studied that. You want a guy who has like a safety linebacker background who can make tackles in space, but also has speed. And I think he kind of fits that mold. I think there's going to be some competition for him. What about you?
That's interesting. I was going to say that he's the other safety who'd return. So I'm going to stick with my yes, but that was some good insight from.
I think Nick Scott. Here, I'll put this out there. I think Nick Scott's going to be cheaper. And he's a personal protector. I wouldn't want him on defense either, but like he knows the defense. He could be a fourth safety. If you're going in with like one of the premier safeties, a draft pick, Damani Richardson, Xavier Woods, and Nick Scott, I think you feel fine at safety. But
interesting. Yeah. I mean, not knowing exactly how the money's going to work out, just
right.
from a preference standpoint, give me Sam Franklin over Nick Scott. So I'm still going to stick with yes.
Oh, I agree. I completely agree. I would want Sam Franklin over Nick Scott, but I also think that Nick Scott's going to turn out to be cheaper.
Cool.
So as we get into that, let's bring up the under contract depth chart, because I thought this would be a good way to illustrate kind of what this team is working with heading into the negotiating period. So let's start with offense, okay? Zach, thank you for doing this for us. Ooh, even in Observer colors. So that's not really processing blue, but it is Charlotte Observer blue. All right, and I will go down this list because most of you are listening to this. At quarterback, under contract, they have Bryce Young, Andy Dalton, and Jack Plummer. At running back, they have Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, Jonathan Brooks, and Amani Bailey, who was signed to a futures deal. At the 2 wide receiver spots, at 1 spot, they have Xavier Legette, Bryson Tremaine, who they signed to a futures deal, TJ Luther, who was on the practice squad, Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, and Dax Milan, who was also a practice squad player. At tight end, I had this as a 12 personnel look. The 1 tight end spot, they have Jatavian Sanders, Jordan Matthews, and Dominique Daphne. At the other tight end spot, they have Tommy Tremble and James Mitchell, who they just signed as a future contract. At left tackle, they have Ike Iguanu and Brandon Walton. At left guard, they have Damian Lewis and Chandler Zavala. At center, they have a battle between Austin Corbett and Cade Mays, who is a restricted free agent, but is likely to be back. And then second-year center, Andrew Raym, who spent last year on the practice squad. At right guard, they have Robert Hunt, Jared Kingston, and Jatir Carter, who was on the practice squad last year. And then finally, for the offense at right tackle, Taylor Moden's the starter. Josh Nijman is the backup. Now, if we can keep this up, Zach, as we talk, it implies that for the most part, they have the bodies at the position, but I think it's very clear at wide receiver in particular, they could use a boost. And so we're going to talk about that in a second, about top targets. Alex and I are each going to name our top targets for each position, and then we'll go through it. But I wanted to go through the under contract depth chart first. So let's move to the next slide, the defense, Zach. Okay, so this is what I think really illustrates everything. At defensive end, 1 defensive end position, they have Derek Brown and Sam Roberts. At nose tackle, they have Shai Tuttle, Jaden Crumedy, the 6th-round pick from last year, Jared Clark, and Papo Amabe, who was injured all of last year after being a rookie invite to training camp. And then at the other defensive end position, they have Ashawn Robinson and LeBrian Ray. At one outside linebacker spot, they have DJ Wanham, Amari Barno, and Thomas and Kuhn. At one inside linebacker spot, they have Josie Jewell, Claudin Cherilus, and John Radigan, their special teams saves. At the other inside linebacker spot, they have Trevin Wallace and Jacoby Windman. At the other outside linebacker spot, they have Jatavian Clowney, DJ Johnson, and Kenny Dyson. The vacuum! And then at corner, this is where you really see the thinning of the secondary. One corner spot, I have them starting J.C. Horn and a Caleb Evans as his backup. The other cornerback spot, I have them rocking with Shaw Smith-Wade and Shamar Both Olamu. This is a base 3-4 look, by the way. And then at safety, they've got Damani Richardson and no one else. Like, it's a clean slate there. And then let's go to special teams. This will be very quick, Zach. So you can visualize this. So at long snapper, J.J. Jansen, as Alex mentioned earlier, they signed Matthew Wright, a journeyman kicker, to just kind of come in here and compete. And then punter, nobody's under contract. So we can get rid of these slides from now. But I just wanted you to be able to visualize it as I was kind of going through it. I know that was kind of, it was like watching a Kevin Costner directed movie. It was pretty long, but I wanted to just you to be able to visualize this as Zach probably laughs off air. Let's go into talking about each of our top targets. Safety is very clearly this team's biggest bodies need. I don't know if it's the biggest positional need, but let's get into that. So we're each going to hand out the safety that we think they should go after, or they could possibly go after. Thinking is them, not necessarily us, right? So I'll start by sending this to you, Alex. Who do you got for their safety option?
Yeah. When you lay it all out, just real quick, when you lay it all out like that, from a body's perspective, that defensive backfield needs so much work. Oh my goodness. Yeah. The starting Shaw Smith-Wade opposite J.C. Horn, it was. I mean, I knew that intellectually, but seeing it laid out like that is interesting. Makes me kind of more interested in Will Johnson at that number 8 pick in the NFL draft. But anyway, I digress.
Hey, I got a ton of flack for that, but go on.
Okay, well, at the safety spot, in free agency, I like this guy named Cameron Bynum. Mike, I know you like him too. Out of the Minnesota Vikings, notched 96 tackles and 3 interceptions last year. He was also, for just like casual fans of the NFL, he was like one of the coordinators of their dances. The Minnesota Vikings were well known for their like fun celebratory dances. They did like a Parent Trap thing. They did a High School Musical, We're All in This Together thing. Anyway, I just think that was funny. I think he can provide important leadership in that room. I think he can be a competent safety, something that these Panthers need. And I personally think that they're going to bring back Xavier Woods, and I think Xavier Woods, Cameron Bynum, and Damani Richardson, those would be 3 starting caliber safeties. So I'm gonna roll with Cameron Bynum. What about you, Mike? Who you got at safety?
Okay, well, I do think they will be heavily in the Javon Holland mix. I think he's going to price out of their range, and I think they're going to. Sometimes it's not about the moves you make; it's the moves you don't make. And Holland has some inconsistencies on tape, especially in coverage, even though he's known for being a big play player. But guess what? I'm going to go with Trevon Moehrig from the Las Vegas Raiders. There's a dog to him. I've got a photo of him that I uploaded into the system of him screaming in Tommy Tremble's face when they played the Raiders and the Panthers in week 3. So that could be fun. Moehrig is a very, 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 very consistent and good run stopper. And as I mentioned earlier on the podcast, they really need guys that can fit gaps, be aggressive, play with their hair on fire, read and react, and do that. Now, some might say his profile, he's probably not the best in coverage, but he has 6 interceptions over the last 4 years and 29 pass breakups. He's coming off a career year from the pass breakup standpoint. He had 104 tackles, 5 of which were for loss, 3 QB hits, a sack, 10 pass breakups, and 2 interceptions. He's started all of the last 34 games for the Raiders. He's only missed 2 games due to injury in his entire career over 4 seasons. So he's played in 64, or he's played in 66 of 60, what? That's over 4 years. So 34, 51.
I'm not.
So he's played in 66 of 68 career games. He's durable. He's also really big at the position. He's 6'2" and 202 pounds. You can put him on tight ends. I think he's a really impressive player. I think he's going to bring some attitude and dog to whichever secondary he goes to, and I think the Panthers should hope it's their secondary. Now, we're probably at the midway point. Typically, you're used to us doing like a 30 to 35-minute podcast, but since this is such a special edition, Zach and I have agreed that we are going to go longer. Alex doesn't have a choice, as in most things in our beat relationship, but just kidding.
As Alex smiles and shrugs.
Yeah. Speaking of choices, edge rusher, right? It's been the top of everybody's list since Brian Burns was shipped out of town last year around this time. What do you got, Alex? Who's the guy that you think they should target? Who do you think they will target, and why does it make sense?
Mike, do you want to go first? Because I'm not going to choose a free agent specifically.
Yeah, sure. Let's do this on the fly. So I'm going to go with Zietlow Ojulari. I'm a very big believer in not paying pass rushers who are kind of on the back end of their production timeline. Zietlow Ojulari is a guy who I think makes a lot of sense for them because he's young and you can sign him long term. He also comes from the Giants, where Brandon Beane knows him pretty well. He's not like a guy. He's very similar to DJ Wadham, where he's never been like a 10-sack guy. He's just needed the right fit. He's also dealt with some injuries. He's missed 12 games over the last 2 years. And really, overall, he's only played 46 games in 4 seasons. So that's missing 22 games overall. This is a high upside move. You're not going to sign him for a lot. Maybe you sign him to a 1-year prove-it deal, and then you go from there. Maybe you sign him to a similar 2-year deal that you did with DJ Wadham, but he's a guy to fill out that rotation. And then in the draft, you were gunning for an upgraded pass rusher, so everybody can grow together. I think it's a low risk, high reward signing. Maybe you sign him for like 1 year, 8 or 2 years for 15 or 16, similar to Wadham, and you get a guy in here. This edge rusher class is not particularly great. A lot of older guys. Von Miller was just added to the list. I mean, we just saw that Harold Landry is no longer, part of the group. But like, if you look at this list, it's not particularly impressive. Joey Bosa is 30 and is going to command a ton of money. Khalil Mack probably wants to go play for a winner and chase a ring at 34. Hassan Reddick wanted astronomical money last year, and now he's over 30. Like, there's just a lot of aging dudes. So really, it's mostly Chase Young, Ojulari, and like Josh Sweat. And I think Josh Sweat is going to make a mint after his Super Bowl performance. So you said you don't have a free agent. Who do you have?
Well, firstly, I do want to commend you on the Ojulari pick. I think it is dangerous, tricky business to say he's a low risk, high reward guy. But like you said, of the people that are out there,
you got to be creative,
right? Yeah, that's a really creative selection. I'm impressed. Okay, so I want to have the Trey Hendrickson conversation, and I want to say my piece, and then I imagine, just based on our conversations, you are going to dress that down. But I think Trey Hendrickson. I just think Trey Hendrickson. Okay, so I just think Trey Hendrickson should be a trade target for the Panthers this offseason, and I will explain to you why. He's obviously, his reputation precedes him. He led the league in sacks last year as an all-pro defensive end. He had 17.5 sacks this past season, and actually he had 17.5 sacks in 2023 as well. So that production wasn't really a fluky sort of thing. The asking price for if you're the Bengals, or for the Bengals, as CBS NFL insider Jonathan Jones and former Observer alum Jonathan Jones said was the Bengals are looking for a high third round pick for him. And the Panthers have that in the chamber. Now, you might be thinking, okay, wait, if the Bengals have this all pro guy, why are they willing to deal him for relatively, for like not a super high price? Well, the Bengals have just like a lot going on this offseason. Jeez Louise, man. They franchise tag T. Higgins. They are going to need to address Jamar Chase's future. He's probably going to have a record breaking extension. Uh, you know,
Like Sticky just basically set off like a chain reaction of tight end contracts. Like, yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. So like they granted Trey Hendrickson permission to seek a trade, and Trey Hendrickson then goes on the air and says, "No, I want to be in Cincinnati." The whole thing was kind of strange. However, that all kind of like links or makes me believe that the Panthers could be in a discussion if they want to be in a discussion with Trey Hendrickson. Let's see. Like I said, the Panthers have their own third round draft pick, so they have the ability to go get him. Secondly, then the moment you do get him, you're going to have to extend him for a lot of money. And his base salary in 2024 was about $14.8 million a year, according to Over the Cap. And the Panthers are going to be in good salary cap position in 2025 and beyond if they stick to the projections that they will. Like if they are going to just pay out Taylor Moton this year and not restructure his contract, if they are going to handle business and not kick the can down the road in a lot of different situations with Dan Morgan. I think that they could pull this off, and I think that would be huge. Again, I know he's 30 years old, and I know you probably have some thoughts about scheme fit. I mean, the Bengals did give up like a boatload of rushing yards last season. Not nearly as much as the Panthers. They didn't quite get to the 3,000 yard threshold, but what the Panthers did on defense was utterly remarkable last year in not a great way. I just think that he would be such an asset for him. And then on top of that, if you use that number 8 pick to either bolster your defensive backfield or double dip and get a defensive front guy with Trey Hendrickson, I mean, I think that could be a really bold, splashy, important move for this defense. And I don't know. That's me. Go get him. If I need to if I'm trying to get Dan Morgan fired up, like, bro, this is your time. Go get him. Now, Mike, tell me why I'm wrong.
So I'll say this. I am a massive Trey Hendrickson fan. I was at his pro day at FAU way back in the day. They made him work out on a track field because he was the only notable guy there. I think he's great. I think he's a really good 4-3 defensive end. I do not think they really have a scheme that fits what he probably wants to do, even if they were willing to pay the money and make the trade. I'd also say you're probably going to have to give him anywhere between $27 and $32 million a year. And at 30, when he's coming from the outside, that's kind of scary, especially because he's not a very good run defender. So you're telling me that you're willing to trade Brian Burns, who's in his mid-20s, and who has given you sack production and done all this stuff as a regime. Similarly, not very good against the run, obviously. And you're willing to trade him for, what a lot of people mocked as a second-round pick and change, only to turn around and trade for a guy who, yes, he gets sacks and droves. He is very talented, but he's also several years older and going to command even more money. I just think, it goes against their philosophy. And also, again, I just don't, he's listed as 270 pounds. Like, I don't know that I'm putting him in space. I don't know that I'm going to allow him to drop back. I mean, they could run more hybrid fronts where he's just a hands down defensive end, but that also kind of changes the scheme a little bit. So I don't think it's like a complete, hey, they shouldn't do it or it won't happen. I would just be very surprised. All right.
Well, just real quick to follow up on that. Are you basing your he's not a great run stopper off of tape? And then that's my first question. And my second question is, I know you equated him to Brian Burns. I loved Brian Burns. I truly did. But do you not think that Hendrickson is better?
I think he's better. I think Brian Burns was a better scheme fit in space, more athletic, definitely a more dynamic guy in space. It's from a speed standpoint. He's also younger. I mean, that's part of the economics of this, right? It's like you want to be able to get the long term.
But that's what made him. His age also made him more expensive, though.
But he's not going to be more expensive. Trey Hendrickson's just led the league in sacks and dwarfed any numbers that Brian Burns has done. He's going to make at least $28 million is my guess, and probably significantly more than that. Like, he wants $30 million a year. That's part of the issue here. That's part of the reason why they're trading him. And he is, look, I think he's really, really good. Maybe the Panthers look at this as this is an opportunity to change up the scheme and do something different. Look, if they landed him, he's a really good player. He'd be really good for the locker room. I'm not saying it's the wrong move. I'm saying I just don't think they're going to do it.
Yeah.
I think you've stated really good cases. I don't see that happening.
Mm.
But let's stick to the defense, okay?
Yeah,
let's go with defensive line, because that's clearly another topic of discussion. As Zach loses internet. So hopefully he is able to retain what we are recording.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Yeah, but anyway, let's keep going, and hopefully he gets back to us, and maybe he'll edit this part out. Or maybe he won't, and this will be like a blooper. Let's talk about defensive line. I'll start. I think Milton Williams is the guy that I have linked to the Panthers more than anyone. I do think he will be in their discussions. I think that's a position that the Panthers are going to be willing to pay for. They've talked a big game about improving their defensive line talent. I think they will. And to me, Milton Williams is the most impressive interior pass rusher available. He's coming off a great Super Bowl performance. He's missed one game due to injury his entire career. And there's not a lot of wear on his tires. I mean, he's been a rotational pass rusher internally for the Eagles for years. I covered his rookie year. And he's a guy who's really, really talented, and you can use him in a lot of ways. I mean, they mostly used him as an interior defensive lineman. You can use him as a 4-eye. You can use him as a 5 technique. You can use him as an outside end. Like, you can do pretty much anything you want to do in the front 7 outside of playing him inside linebacker. I think you can even drop him in coverage as an exotic look if you wanted to send an exotic blitz, or send guys up the middle with a double A gap blitz. Anyway, Zach's back with us. But with that said, I think Milton Williams, or as we called him in Philly, his rookie year, Milkshake, could be a really productive player for this team, especially next Players Brown and A'Shawn Robinson. I just think he's exactly what you want. He's in his mid-20s. He's versatile. He can move around. He doesn't have to play every single snap. He is going to be effective. He's going to take on double teams. He's going to make everybody else better. The one caveat with him is he's not the best run defender, but I do wonder if that's partially because teams were purposefully running at him instead of Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis over the years. So we'll see how that goes. But I think if you were going to break the bank for one dude, he's the guy. What do you got, Alex?
Wait, so when you say, as we called him Milkshake, like, did he not have any agency in this nickname?
No, most people don't have any agency in my stupid nicknames, but Chris Franklin and I, who we've had on the show, we would call him Milkshake. But
that's so random, bro.
Yeah, it is. But he's that dude's a dog, and he's versatile, and there's a lot of Aaron Donald to him.
Word.
Go on. What do you got?
I'm gonna throw out 2 names that will not live up to the Milkshake guy in nicknames, nor in neither in nickname nor in pizzazz. One guy, Bobby Brown III, he is a guy out of the Los Angeles Rams, 44 tackles last year, former 4th round pick, 6'4", 324 pounds. I think he could be an asset on the interior defensive line for the Panthers. not the most productive season, but he was a good pickup, and I think this defensive line needs depth, so he could be
He's
an
a good run
option.
stopper.
Well, I mean, and that's important, but also Jadeveon Clowney was supposed to be a good run stopper at the outside linebacker spot. Ashawn Robinson was, and all of a sudden Ashawn Robinson had like this great pass rushing year, and it's like, yo, like you're supposed to be preventing opposing teams from getting 3,000 yards.
What I would add to your point is AC Carter, the new outside linebackers coach, was the assistant D-line coach with the Rams last year. And part of the reason why Bobby Brown's going to hit free agency is because they developed Braden Frisk. They developed Jared Verse. And so some guys are going to flush out of there because of talent and money and roles. So
that's a compelling connection. I don't know where your brain goes to find those connections, but that's good. And then the other guy I was going to talk about was BJ Hill. I know him from NC State days, just growing up in North Carolina. He's 30 now. He's also a Bengal and probably going to fall through the cracks of their crazy offseason. With, as I mentioned before, T. Higgins, Chase, or the Jamar Chase thing and the Trey Hendrickson thing. The past 2 seasons he's been really productive. 107 tackles, 30 quarterback hits, 7.5 sacks. I mean, I think
he's a player.
I think he's another guy that's worth looking at. But yeah, it'll be a win if the Panthers get a milkshake. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hey, there we go. All right, let's get to it. It's a topic everybody wants to talk about. It's wide receiver because look, it needs work. I'm not gonna lie, but the avenues are decreasing by the day, literally. Who do you got at wide receiver? Who's the target you got?
MVS.
Oh man. Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Yes. He is. I'm saying that because I've said this on this podcast before, and it wasn't the greatest well-received thing. I don't know how to properly say that. It's late on a Sunday night. He's 30 years old. He had 411 receiving yards last year, 4 touchdowns. He played for Buffalo at the beginning part of last year, was kind of lost in their receiving talent, then went to New Orleans and made an immediate impact. I don't know, man. I like him. And I think
he's an efficient shopper with other people's money. Like most of your recommendations outside of Trey Hendrickson, very efficient with the cap.
Well, but here's the thing. I'm not trying to spend money. If I'm the Panthers, I'm not trying to spend money on offense this year.
No, but in general, BJ Hill, Bobby Brown,
I mean, Cameron Bynum might have a decent market.
Yeah, he's gonna have a decent market. But I'm just saying you're very cost effective, which I appreciate. Trust me.
Well, I mean, we were gearing up for this podcast outside of having musical theater talk. We were gearing up to have a robust DK Metcalf discussion. And so I kind of had that in mind. They were going to have to have a whole bunch of money available for him.
Sure.
But yeah, I like this Scantling guy, or this Valdez-Scantling guy. He can provide depth to a receiving room. He can provide veteran leadership to a receiving room that needs it. Adam Thielen's great, but behind him, it's a whole bunch of young guys. I think David Moore, to a certain extent, filled that role a little bit last year. And as you reported, as we told stories about him, he was a really important voice on that offense last year. So, Mike, who you got at wide receiver? And it's not going to be Tutu Atwell because he just blew everyone out of the water with his
that $10 million. I was like, Tutu Atwell makes a ton of sense for $5 million. They're wrong there. Listen, I wrote about this earlier on the week, and I felt compelled to because this team does need upgrades at wide receiver. There's no question about it. But sometimes the upgrades you make that nobody's talking about, that don't have the shimmer and shine on them, similar to Robert Hunt, right? Robert Hunt got a $100 million deal. Most of the league didn't know who he was. Darius Slayton's a guy who I used to cover in the NFC East. He can take the top off the defense. He is a speedy wide receiver who can get open in a flash. he's what they need. This was the slowest wide receiver group in the league last year. I'm almost positive. And their yards after catch ability was deplorable. Like when Jalen Coker's your number one yards after the catch guy, you were in trouble. I think what's really intriguing about Darius Slayton, who has had 3 seasons of 700 yards or more, in 6 seasons with the Giants. He's battle tested. He's played in a tougher market. He's a veteran presence. He's a guy who, if Adam Thielen moves on next year, can lead the room. He's a guy who's been extremely productive despite constant issues at quarterback. Eli Manning getting injured, Daniel Jones being a disaster, Drew Lock being out there, Tommy DeVito for whatever reason going viral. Like, he has endured all of this change with the Giants and been relatively consistent. I just think, like, when you're looking in free agency, I have a hard and fast rule that you don't sign guys over 30 in the first 2 waves, because I just think if you're a team that's like on the come up, that's what you got to do. He's 6'1", 198 pounds. He's from Norcross, Georgia, so he's not from too far away. He's only 28. He strikes me as a guy you sign to a 3-year deal and you say, hey, look, you're going to lead this room. When you look at his career over the last 3 years, he's only missed 2 games. He's been a vital piece of this puzzle for them as they've he's eclipsed 700 yards 4 times. Even as the team has dealt with a litany of quarterback issues, a litany of wide receiver issues. And I think he could complement Xavier Legette and Adam Thielen very, very well. I also think he's the perfect influence for Jalen Coker. And on top of that, I don't think he's going to break the bank to the point where you're like, yeah, maybe we won't take a first round. If you're the Panthers, you say maybe we won't take a first round wide receiver. Nope, I think you can still do that by drafting Darius Slayton, because he's a guy who can play all 3 wide receiver roles, which is something that Dave Canales has stressed. I think he'd be the most complete wide receiver on the roster from day one. And yeah, that's a low bar, but I also think he's a guy who, in the right situation, can put up DJ Moore type numbers. I think he is a logical replacement for DJ Moore that they've needed for 2 years. He has had some drops issues. DJ Moore had some drop issues. Some guys do. He's not a true number one. There are only 10 of those guys in the league, in my opinion. But I think the way that people clamor for T. Higgins and the like, yes, there's a drop off there. He is not as talented as T. Higgins. He's not as big. But I think that Slayton can be a featured wide receiver in this league. I've always liked him. He always had really productive games when I covered the Eagles, and they played against him. He can break away and get yards after the catch, and they really need that, especially for Bryce Young. So that's my sales pitch at wide receiver. What do you got, Alex?
I just wanted to give a quick plug. I know I shouldn't be bragging on Mike, but like, he was really
you'll get in the comments.
Yeah, no, but like, go. I know he just succinctly explained the Darius Slayton thing, but like, go read his story on him too. It was reactionary to the T. Higgins franchise tag news, and it was really quite good. I think that he would be a really prudent choice as well. I mean, I'm on the MVS train, but like, he's a guy that I don't think a lot of casual NFL fans, if you're not from the Northeast area, would know about. And so, Zach Dennis said I liked the story also. So good for you, Mike.
Thank you. Well, I do everything I do in life for Zach, to be honest with you. That's a guy with voice. Yeah, I think we kind of made it clear. Originally, we were going to just do like who's the one guy of the group. I think it's pretty clear Milton Williams is the guy that I think is the number one of the 4. Who do you have as the number one of the 4? We'll do that really quick.
Most essential, I don't know, but the guy I want to see the most is Trey Hendrickson. I get it, the scheme thing, whatever. It's not, but like, the Panthers need to level up their talent, and
sure.
he would be so great. He would be such a compelling guy to cover, I think. So I'm going to roll with him.
All right. Well, I think, look, as we go out here, I wanted to empty the notebook a little bit and kind of to prep you as we get into this day. This is going to go up very early Monday. Maybe stuff would have happened already. But what I would tell you is this. the wide receiver position, I don't think they want to overly spend at. It's another reason why I think Darius Slayton, based on what I know, is a guy that makes a lot of sense for them. They will be in the safety market. That is a position where they will be able to negotiate at the top of the list. They will also be in the cornerback market. If they are not able to re-sign Mike Jackson, a name that I would look out for is Isaiah Rodgers, who just had a pretty good season with the Eagles after missing an entire year due to gambling on the NFL. He's a guy that can play inside or outside. I do feel like nickel is an interesting position, but the problem with nickel corners, they're a lot like relief pitchers. They're very volatile. They'll have a great year one year. They'll be terrible the next because there's so much to do there. And so typically teams don't sign nickel corners to very high end deals. They typically want to develop them. You saw that with Shaw Smith-Wade. It wouldn't shock me if they gave Shaw Smith-Wade more competition at that nickel spot, but I think from an outside perspective, Rodgers could play pretty well there. I think based on what I know, I would be stunned if the Panthers pass on don't draft a tight end in April. As I said, they did check in on the DK Metcalf trade. Just the price and the trade compensation was a lot to stomach. But the reason why I bring that up is I think it could still indirectly impact the Panthers because now the Seahawks are one of 3 teams that has 2 second-round picks. And unlike the other 2 teams that have 2 second-round picks, the Panthers trading back could get them 2 second-round picks in trading back. So the Seahawks are positioned at 18. The Panthers are positioned at 8, going back 10 spots. They might be able to get a second and third round pick out of a deal from the Seahawks, especially because now they have 2 second-round picks. So they could retain one of their second-round picks and also trade one to the Panthers. We also know that John Schneider and Dan Morgan have a background. So that's something to keep in mind as we get closer to the draft. Another thing, they will obviously address the front seven. That's going to happen. It's just a matter of how they do it. A position that I am really much keeping an eye on is what's going on with Miles Sanders. I think they're going to be in a game of chicken until his roster bonus is due on the 3rd day of the league year. If they do move on from Miles Sanders, a name to keep an eye on at running back is Ty Johnson from the Buffalo Bills. He fits exactly what Dave Canales wants in that receiving running back position. I think he would rotate in really well. He had a really strong year with the Buffalo Bills. I also wouldn't close the door completely on Raheem Blackshear. I know there's been reports out there that they don't plan to give him a restricted tender. I don't expect that either. But I do think there is going to be some opportunity there. I also think if you're a playmaker with returnability, you are going to be of interest to the Panthers. I don't know if they're going to spend that money in free agency or in the draft, but I believe they will address both returner spots this offseason as well. And so last but not least, just based it in my conversations just around the league, Hecker is probably the next domino to fall if there is a re-signing before noon on Monday. I'm anxious to see how the next kind of 12 or so hours go as we're recording this. We'll see if that gets done. I think overall, though, we are looking forward to covering this period with you. The Observer is running a $1.99 for your first month special. You can also sign up for our newsletter, which Alex is producing for Monday morning. Make sure you get that in your inbox every Monday. We'll also have some updated links, posts, and breaking news, as a lot of people learned about Austin Corbett probably from our email blast. And, you can check out all of our content on charlotteobserver.com. We will have live blogs set up on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to cover all the comings and goings, all the interesting stuff happening with the league. We'll have explainers on free agency. We'll have lists of who's available and so on and so forth that Alex and I will be tag teaming. And Alex, that, I think, is the perfect time to end this podcast.
Good stuff, Mike. Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your free agency and Panthers needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
That's a wrap, Zach.